We're glad to have you here while we meet with Rabbi Doron Perez, the head of World Mizrahi, an old friend and a beloved colleague. And he's going to tell us a little bit about what has happened to his family during the war and share with us some of the remarkable courage and hope he has. So, Rabbi, welcome. Thanks for joining us here at the Sachs Herenstein Center. Always good to see you. Tell us where you were and where your sons were when the war broke out.
On that dark day in October, which we were hoping was going to be a very special day, of course, Shabbat and Simchat Torah, my wife and I and some of our children were here in our home in Yad Binyamin, pretty much very center in Israel, with my son, Yonatan, our older son, who himself is an officer in the paratroopers, but he was out for Shabbat. He was here with his then fiancée, Galia. So we were here and he was here with us. And our younger son, who's also an officer in the Tank Corps, he was positioned with his crew on his base on the Gaza border for Shabbat.
And the war breaks out. You begin to hear news. When do you hear what's happened to Yonatan and Daniel?
Well, in Yad Binyamin, like many places in Israel, we started receiving a rocket barrage from about 6:30 in the morning. So at 6:30 a.m., we all made our way into the air raid shelter. And we've got about 1 minute in the Yad Binyamin to get into the air raid shelter. I'd say for the next hour and a half, Dr. Brown, for about an hour and a half, I'd say we were in and out of the air raid shelter with 10 or 15 different sort of, ongoing barrages. At around 8 o'clock in the morning, an hour and a half later, my son's phone, he's an officer, so he keeps his phone on Shabbat, even though he doesn't really look at it unless he's expecting an emergency. He started, the phone started pinging nonstop. And he saw that the group that he was, one of the groups that he was on with 120 other officers was pinging far too much. And he said, Dad, something's wrong. He went onto the phone and he saw basically them all saying the word hazui in Hebrew, crazy, crazy, crazy. He scrolled up to the top and he saw that there was that first picture which came out of the like this minivan with terrorists shooting it looked like it was in Sderot. He said, what is this? There wasn't a havam in it. There wasn't a thought that this could be from Gaza. He didn't know what it was. So he was dumbfounded, as with the other officers. And then a few moments afterwards, just after 8 o'clock, he got a WhatsApp from his base commander, who is a brigade. He's a lieutenant colonel. He's what's called a Magad. He's the head of a brigade, and he's responsible for all of the entire base of new recruits, the basic training of paratroopers. My son's a company command. He's got about 150 soldiers, and the brigadier, so the head of the brigade said, whoever can should come down to Sderot. He gets up, is about to run down to Sderot to say, easy, where are you going? Remember, none of us at this point knew what was going on. We weren't listening to the news. We didn't know what was going on. It's 8 in the morning. Pretty much nobody in Israel knew what was going on. He said, something's going on in Sderot. But I said, but you're a company commander of new recruits. What's it got to do with you? And that didn't sound like a call up to me. It sounded like the commander said, anyone who can. What does that mean? I said, maybe phone him. You've got your fiancé here. Just phone him and ask him what it means. He phones his commander and he says, if you have a weapon, come to Sderot and meet at the Magen David Adom. I said, Yonatan, that doesn't sound like a call up. That sounds like if you have, what does that mean? And he actually didn't have a weapon. He had a weapon, a handgun. He had left his M16 on the base because it was Simchat Torah. It's actually the first time he's ever left it behind. And then it was going to be Hakafot Shniot. He was going to take his fiancée back to Kibbutz Sa'ad. She lives also close to the Gaza border, on Motzei Shabbat, Motzei Chag, and go from there to the base. Eric, at that point, he said, Dad, something's going on. I'm taking my weapon. Off he went. The next time we heard from him, it was 4:30 in the afternoon, where the phone was ringing nonstop from a number we didn't recognize. It's Shabbat. My wife's phone, my phone, my wife's phone, my phone. About half an hour to an hour of all different numbers. I said, okay, this has never happened before. Something's wrong. I answered the phone and he said, Dad, I'm okay. The moment you hear that as a parent, you get nervous. I've been shot in the leg. I said, how badly? He said, they're checking me out. I'm okay. He sounded okay. You have no idea what's going on here. That I cannot describe to you what's going on over here. He happened to be close to the base where our other son was based. He said, Dad, I did notice that Daniel was in his tank because he knows where his tank parks, and we were hoping and praying that that meant that he was safe. But by the end of Shabbat, he was in Soroka Hospital in Beersheba. That was Yonatan. So basically, by the time Shabbat comes out and we speak to Yonatan, he's been shot in the leg in Soroka Hospital, and our other son, we had no contact with him, and we couldn't get hold of him that evening as well.
Yeah. So you've been carrying all of this for a lot of weeks. Last week I was in Israel. We saw each other. We came to visit you back garden, myself and a group of about 30 rabbis and educational leaders, just to see you in person, just to hear your story in person. And Yonatan was there. He was in his madim, in his uniform, ready to go back, even though he doesn't have to go back. So before we talk about Daniel, help us understand a little bit, give us the picture of what Yonatan's battle was like, what fighting Yonatan did, and why Yonatan decided to go back into this war.
Mm-hmm. Eric, I've heard this story so many times, mainly not from Yonatan. I've heard it from his commanding officer, other people involved in the battles. And I've heard it so many times that every time I hear it again, another piece of information is given over. I'll start from the end. He was involved in 5.5 to 6 hours of gun battles in a place where nobody knew what was going on. The fact that he's alive today and the fact that he is only relatively light to moderately injured, shot through the leg in a way which did not hit any of the main, the main artery, the bone, the main nerves, is nothing short of a miracle. In fact, he went to Beit Levenstein, to one of the top orthopedic surgeons to check him out, who heard about his case and phoned him and said, I want to check you out. He said, there's no such thing as a bullet going through the leg without causing more damage. He checked him and he said, this is unbelievable. This bullet went through your leg, and only by the grace of God was he not, more severely injured, or God forbid, even worse. To cut a long story short, he arrived in Sderot at 9 o'clock in the morning, joined his commanding officer, and for the next 5 to 6 hours involved in sort of ad hoc, ongoing gun battles with terrorists hiding in all different places. He picked up along the way a retired general who got into the car with him. They picked up another battalion commander and 5 or 6 officers, plus some special forces of the police, the SWAT team called the Yamam. An inorganic group went together in a jeep and shooting at terrorists along the way. Now, remember, he only has a handgun, 2 handguns. He took my other son's handgun. In one of their first encounters, the jeep in front of him, which had special forces from Maglan, was hit by an RPG missile, close range. Unfortunately, 3 of the officers were killed on the spot. What I found out subsequently, only in the recent days, that they also had an RPG missile shot at their jeep, and it went straight over their head. So they opened their doors of the jeep and started shooting in all directions. It was at that point that the person sitting next to him, the Yedidia, who is a company commander with him, got shot in the stomach. And because of that, when they took him out, they took him to hospital. Yonatan took his gun and took his vest. He took a helmet from somebody from Sayeret Matkal, from the ambulance. And this is what it was like. Erica, the people, the first 6 hours, the soldiers who were killed were one of 2 types of people. They were either special forces, which had been flown in, such as Sayeret Matkal, Shaldag, Maglan, etc., or officers such as my son, who didn't know what they were going into, who only knew about it because their commanding officer said something's going on, come. My son tells me the best of the best of the best, and I could share examples of people of his rank and above who just so many were unfortunately killed on that horrific day, and putting themselves in the line. in a gun battle in the base of Nachal Oz. They killed many terrorists, and they managed to save many chayalot. They saved about 25 chayalot who were hiding in different places. And in one of the gun battles, about 2 hours into the battle, he was shot through the leg, and the person on his left shot in the back, and the person on his right shot through the stomach. So thank God they're all okay. So Erica, for me, the fact that our son is alive, unlike about 300 soldiers on that day, the fact that he was not more badly injured is nothing short of a miracle within a miracle within a miracle. And I have to say, if I'm honest about my coping mechanism, I don't know if that hadn't happened, and I didn't have that to hold on to, and I didn't see the Yad Hashem in such a clear way saving our son, I don't know where I would be, because there are many, many friends of mine. A friend of mine, Rabbi Shmuel Slotki, has lost two of his sons who went out to battle together and were killed at the entrance to Alumim. And when I sat, Erica, with Dr. Brown, with other members of the families, the amount of families which have lost or have hostage multiple family members is just outrageous. So he fought as a hero, as so many thousands did that day, and by the grace of God, he was only moderately to lightly wounded.
Yeah, and it was so good to see him myself. And I'm so profoundly grateful to UJA Federation of New York for arranging the trip so that we could be there to see sort of the people we care about and love in a three-dimensional way, and not on a screen and a small text. The gratitude you feel for where Yonatan is now. What about Danielle? What do you know?
Danielle, for the first 2.5 weeks, almost 3, was missing in action. Him and most of the people who fought with him, they simply had no knowledge of what happened. It's quite in one of the meetings with the families we had with the Minister of Defense, one of the ladies said, she said, to the Minister Gallant, she said, my father was killed, 80 years old, from Nir Oz. My mother is taken hostage, and my brother, 47, is missing. She said, Mr. Minister, how in today's day and age, 3 weeks afterwards, all you can say is he's missing? Did he disappear? Did a Martian take him? How in 2023, with the technology that we have, that we don't know? So very hard having a son who's missing. What does that mean? It could be one of many scenarios. They simply said they know he's not amongst the dead that Israel has, the soldiers. They know that he's not. They have no evidence of him being taken hostage, because there's some people from 7:25 in the morning. They have video footage that they were already, taken hostage. In fact, the army's been unbelievable with us. We have the army allots an officer, in our case in Miluim, to accompany us. He came to see us, I think, on the Wednesday or the Thursday morning for the first time, to officially tell us that he was missing. And because we thought so, but we didn't know. And Yossi Shemesh is his name from Shoham. He's been unbelievable. There isn't a day that goes by that he's not in our home, visiting us, speaking to all the different kids. He was here today. He's going to be here tomorrow. He's going to be here the next day, because there's so many developments on so many different levels. But he came to tell us that he's missing, and he said we simply have no cameras. I was saying that the other family that he's accompanying 2 families. He said already on the morning of that first Shabbat, he had already gone to them to tell them that their son's been taken captive. By us, it took 2.5 weeks to know anything different, and we were told that he is in all likelihood taken hostage. They cannot say it 100% sure. They don't have video footage or eyewitness reports, but there's enough evidence which points to the high likelihood of him being held by a terror organization. That's the terminology they use in Gaza. So we, of course, I don't know what's good or bad news today. In what universe is knowing that your son is Bezrat Hashem alive with terrorists in Gaza? In what universe is that good news, if you know what I mean, or better than the alternative? But that's the reality that we are aware of at the moment.
I mean, my heart just breaks. I'm going to try to hold it together because
Mm-hmm.
holding it together, carrying all of this as a family. Um, you made Aliyah. You left. You went back to South Africa, which is where we met. And you came back to Israel. Um, and now, in some way, with two sons who are officers on the front lines, you understand the cost of what this is, and I'm wondering if you can reflect on that a little bit for all of us here who really, again, are thinking about you, praying for Danielle, praying for a refuah shlema to Yonatan. I know he's a lot better. He's not there. So, as you're reflecting as a religious Zionist on what's happened to you and your family, can you share some thoughts?
Yeah, sure. Firstly, just to say, indeed, we met in South Africa with Dr. Brown and your husband, Dr. Brown, and became really close friends and in touch since then. So forgive me now and then for slipping out, Erica. I should be calling you Dr. Brown only.
Please do.
Just to say that, for me, the centrality of Israel has always been part of my Jewish identity. I grew up, like so many South Africans, in a traditional Zionist home. I did not grow up in a Shomrei Shabbat home. But my grandfather, who was the head of Maccabi Sport in South Africa, in fact, they called him Mr. Maccabi. He established the first Jewish country club. He led in the 1950s and 60s the South African team. His whole life was dedicated to Jewish culture and sport in South Africa. And that's what he did his entire life. He was the executive director of Maccabi South Africa. And Erica, in 1979, when I was 9 years old, he gathered the family together and he said, and I'll never forget, he said, I'm a Zionist leader. That's what I've been in Lithuania as a young boy in the Beitar movement, and that's what I've been in South Africa with Maccabi. Even though all my children and grandchildren live in South Africa, I feel as a Zionist leader I need to make Aliyah. My grandfather and grandmother left their children and all their grandchildren in South Africa with the hope and prayer to go live in a tiny little apartment in Tel Aviv, with the hope and prayer that we would follow suit. So, and on my father's side, my mother's side, they're from Lithuania, from Kovna. My father's side, parents actually Moroccan, even though I grew up in an Ashkenazi community in South Africa. My father's parents, since the 50s in Morocco, really living in Israel. So I essentially grew up in a home where from the age of 9, both sets of grandparents lived in Israel. And even though it wasn't, let's call it part of my religious or spiritual identity, it was part of who I was. As I started becoming more religious before my bar mitzvah and came to Yeshiva and started studying I was in Yeshiva Beit El and afterwards Oretz Zion, and started studying in depth the writings of Rav Kook, it gave such a depth to my understanding that Zionism wasn't just a feeling for the Jewish people. It was deeply rooted in something, so much part of an ideology of Judaism. What became, Rav Kook's Ashkafan, the Mizrahi, the land of Israel, the people of Israel, the Torah of Israel, these three anchors of identity in the Torah. And even though I went back, I married my wife, Shelley, and we went back to South Africa, what we thought would be a 2-year shlichut became 15 years. I can tell you that when we met there, every single one of those days felt like it was a shaliach of the land and state of Israel from a spiritual point of view. I was involved in building Mizrahi in South Africa, head of a school, a shul, and I just felt it was a shlichut. Even though we back now for 9 years, and yes, we are paying a very big price. I must say, I hope and pray that the price is an injured son and a son who returns well from captivity, and that there already are, unfortunately, people, thank you, have paid a much, much bigger price, and we have hope, and we are, we're please God, in a very hopeful situation. It hasn't made me question my decisions and identity. I'm talking on behalf of myself. It hasn't made me question them at all. As my wife has said to me, and she's the hero here. You saw Shelley, and she was the one who said we definitely need to go ahead with the wedding. And she has voiced to me, wow, this seems like a very harsh price to be paying. Again, not in terms of doubting decisions necessarily, just in terms of expressing the pain that our family is going through. But I'll say, me as a person who's been privileged to play a role in a religious Zionist leadership, I will say that, if one just looks at the history of the Jewish people from Avraham Avinu's Lech Lecha to the Nisyonot of Vayera of Lech Lecha Moria to the Nisayon coming up of Chayei Sarah, Abraham comes to the land that God has promised him time and time again that is his, and he can't even find a piece of land that belongs to him to bury his wife, which the Rabbeinu Yonah says is his greatest nisayon, that after all God's promises, he can't even find a piece of land underground to bury his wife. But this seems to be the nisayon that the Jewish people on many levels have gone through. And our family is now one of thousands of other families which are either, have suffered in some way or another. But I will say that I still feel it's a privilege to be part of the Jewish people. It's a privilege to live in Israel. It's a privilege to have two sons who, amongst so many other thousands, and I can tell you, Erica, it is everyone you meet from across the board in Israel has put the 200,000 soldiers who came back from around the world, who didn't have to. They were sitting around the world, and every one of them have come back with a desire to put the safety of the Jewish people in the state of Israel before their own, and how blessed we are to be part of such a people.
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful Torah teaching about the nisyonot, the tests. It's always hard to know, when a test is a test, and certainly everyone is being tested in this moment. I think on that level, very differently here in the States and the diaspora, with the almost 400% rise in anti-Semitism. In the UK, it's much higher. It's been a sort of a gut punch of a realization for many people of an undercurrent of hate, persistent hate, that perhaps people didn't think that they would experience. And you're on the side defending the country that we finally did get. You decided to have the wedding. Many people have postponed weddings. I think all of us have watched these beautiful weddings that happen spontaneously on army bases. You decided to go through with the wedding. Shelley, your wife, your beautiful wife, sort of wanted that to happen. What was the decision making for you? What was the sort of the calculus at this time?
Yeah, look, I think as follows. For the first 3-4 days, we were just dumbfounded. We didn't know what was going on. We had an injured son. We had a son missing in action. We were just, Vayidom Aaron, because just didn't know what, like in shock. But then we realized,
Aaron, for those listening or not speakers, it's when Aaron's two sons die and he's silent, and it's sort of a very heavy silence. He's silenced, if you will.
Mm. So thankfully for us, thank God, I say a million times over, that it's not Lahavdil, Ben Chaim L'Chaim. Our son Yonatan was injured but well, and our son Daniel, we didn't know the situation, but we're just in such shock, we didn't quite know what to do. I think by the Wednesday or Thursday, we started sort of coming around and realizing, we've actually got a decision to make. There's a wedding which is supposed to be the following Tuesday. We realized that after a day, like 2 days, that Daniel was not safe in his tank. We got information that that wasn't the case, and that they were no longer in the tank, and we feared. So I think what happened is, Erica, on the Wednesday or Thursday, the army officially sat with us and told us Daniel is amongst the missing Ne'edar, and that status is not going to change within the foreseeable future, next week or two. It's not going to change. Meaning it won't change for a while. I think that gave us the headspace to say, you know what, because how can you go ahead and planning a wedding in 5 days' time? God forbid, a million times over, you might be sitting shiva. We just didn't know what was going on. So I think once we understood that this amorphous definition of missing in action, or, Nedar was his definition, we sat with Yonatan and his wife-to-be Galia and her parents. By the way, her parents are from Kibbutz Sa'ad, so they had to move up north already on the first day, second day. Her father had stayed down south because he was part of the security team there. Her mother was up north. So they were also dislocated and dislodged, and she was at our home since the Chag. I think once we understood that it was going to take a while, my wife had a very strong gut feeling. She said, Doron, they're a frum couple. She can't bear for them just to see them looking into each other's eyes the way that they do. What are they going to do now? Wait weeks and months? If they want to get married, we will support them 100%. Although we have, despite the fact that we have a son who is missing, we said to them, what do you want to do? They said, Mommy, Daddy, what do you want to do? We'd never do what you don't want to. I said, we want to do what you want to do. They said, what's your view? I said, our view is, it's irrelevant what our view is. We think if you want to, you should, but we will support you. They spoke to her parents. We all met together on the Thursday, and we decided to go ahead with it. Not in Ashkelon, not a big wedding where it was planned because of all the restrictions. A small wedding in Yad Binyamin. The incredible ladies and friends of Yad Binyamin put together a wedding in 5 days. Incredible in the Yeshiva high school where Yonatan and Daniel had also studied for their first year in Israel, and it was absolutely beautiful. And the decision-making process was. As far, I'll just say one other important point. Yonatan's direct commander, Roy Zabatani, from the paratroopers, came to visit him on the Wednesday, I think it was. And he said, I heard you deliberating about your wedding. He said, Yonatan, as your commanding officer, I'm telling you to get married tonight in your uniform because Am Yisrael needs a simcha. This is a traditional guy from Tel Aviv. I said to him, Hamafaked, is that a command? He said, it's not a command. So he's not going to listen to you there. But to me, that was, I think what happened for me, Dr. Brown, is that was like the most visceral, natural, raw response, meaning from an outsider coming and saying, how can you not get married? He says to me, you, the rabbi, you just need 2 ADM and a few people around. What's the big deal? So I think that for me also was almost this like natural raw response. And it almost felt, I must say, that it was a decision which sort of made itself. It didn't feel like a heroic decision. It didn't even feel like a decision. It sort of just made itself. And I don't know how we had the koach for it. My wife is the hero here. I can't begin. I know what I'm feeling as a father. I'll just tell you, was so painful for me today when it just happened this afternoon where they brought his belongings from the base. Because at the end of the day, they collect the belongings, and I just couldn't. They bring a list, 2 boxes and a list of what I just couldn't. I said, please just give it to me and go. We just put it in his room, and we haven't looked at it or anything. And it's just all these little realities of just, it's just unimaginable. But at the same time, my wife's the hero here, and we put a smile on our faces. It was very painful at the wedding where the rabbi mentioned that there's one person missing, and that's Daniel. I tried so hard to sort of put him out of my mind for that chuppah, and the rabbi correctly acknowledged his lack of presence. He had to do that. That was very painful for my wife and I and our family, and we had a good cry. But you know what? We wiped the tears away, and we had an amazing simcha. And there were moments of pain, like the family pictures, and when we saw one or two of his close friends which had come. But it was a happy occasion. I'll tell you that a friend of ours said to us something I quote all the time. She said, this chuppah, she said, was the holiest, saddest, happiest, most inspiring chuppah she was ever at. And it was all of the above, but it was happy. It was happy. We felt happiness. And I've said, I didn't do any interviews until after the wedding, after 9 days. I said, a lot of sort of news outlets, and I said, please just contact me after the wedding. I can't speak until after the wedding. And I can tell you that I've seen that it's possible. It is possible to hold totally contradicting feelings, what I could say in Hebrew, charada and chedva, such worry and angst and fear and trembling with elation and celebration and da'aga with simcha. It doesn't seem rational, and I didn't think it was possible, but life is stronger than rationality. And I think Hashem gives kochot. I will say, when people say, where do the kochot come from? I really, really believe with every fibre of my being, it comes from being held by our family, by our friends, by our community, by people around the world who are davening, by the messages. It's really not a cliche when you say you feel held. I think to go through this alone would be the most unimaginable, painful thing. And firstly, we're not alone because unfortunately 240 something other hostages are in the same boat and thousands have been killed. And the Jewish people are going through this horrific thing, but we are also being held. We feel one, we feel loved for, we feel cared. And I don't know, somehow I thought to myself over Shabbat, it almost feels like in the tempestuous waters of the sea where we're just being knocked around in the storm. It's almost like there's this wave that we're riding, and other people have created that wave, and we're just riding on it. And it's been quite something, with tremendous blessing, and of course tremendous curse.
Yeah, I mean, you so aptly describe sort of a page of Jewish history, right? And a page in every Jewish family where there's pain and there's love, and they live in some intersection, and they each deepen each other. We're very grateful that you gave us a clip of the wedding, just 1 minute. We wanted to dance with you. It's the South African flag, is that right?
That wasn't the South African flag. It was the Chativa Sheva. I was basically holding two flags that they brought. One of the paratroopers where Yonatan was, and one of my son Daniel's unit that he's part of. So that was a way of acknowledging the presence in a subtle way, which didn't just in a subtle way.
Tell us a little about Daniel. So just who he is, what he loves, things about him to help us all keep him close in our hearts.
Thank you. Our sons, Yonatan and Daniel, were exceptionally close, even though they're very, very different. Daniel is what they call in Israel the stylist. He was the one who dressed well, liked the finer things in life, was a very difficult child to bring up, which I'll tell you a story in a moment. Loved extreme sport. The more high octane it was, the more. In fact, the reason he was in the very strong world, the reason that he was in tanks and not in infantry, was because he got injured in a wakeboarding. Wakeboarding is a type of skiing where you ski in a lake. Most people go around the lake. Daniel goes around at full speed. Daniel goes over ramps, and he doesn't only go over the ramp, he goes over the ramp and spins a 360 while it's happening. He fell badly once and tore his anterior cruciate ligament. They lowered his profile to 64, 65. He said, "Dad, there is no way I'm going to be sitting behind a screen." I said, "No, you can do Modi'in, you can do this." He said, "No." He said, "You can do that." He said, "You can do that." he is going to be doing something else. He fought with the army until they raised his profile to 72. He was able to go into tanks. He absolutely loved the tank. It appealed to, he picks things up quickly, and he liked the complexity of the tank, but he liked the action of the tank. And he loved it. And when they offered him to go on officer's course, he went to officer's course. He was even considering continuing a further officer's course. Eric, I don't know what happened to him in the army. He became a mensch, meaning from this kid who was literally just all over the place, wakeboarding, high octane sport and everything. He totally fell in line in the army. He was disciplined. He's the type of kid that if he doesn't want to do something, nothing can make him do it. And if he wants to do something, nothing will stop him. He took the army so seriously. He was at various different stages. He was what's called the amidst, the outstanding soldier. We couldn't believe it when he was the outstanding soldier. When they announced it, I said to Shelley, did they call out Daniel as like the top soldier? This is Daniel who just was, very different in his teenage years. And the army, he was unbelievable, took the army very seriously. And even though he's a person who liked the finer things in life, he was very black and white in the army. He said, you're in the army, you had to give the best of yourself for the Jewish people. And he invested in it. He was incredibly fit, always training. He was one of the top runners in there. That, like, whatever he did, he put his mind at 100%. And I'll just tell you one story about Daniel, which I can't resist.
Please.
Listen to the story of what it's like to raise this kid. And I hope and pray that we have all of this energy back with us soon. He's a very, very honest child. He could never tell a lie. You could always tell in his face if he was being untruthful, which he hardly ever was. The one time he came to me at the age of 12, listen to this. He says to me at the age of 12, he says, Dad, there's something that I want to do. I know that it's wrong. I can't do it without telling you, but I want you to know, but I still think I want to do it. Can you tell me what punishment I'll get if I do it? I said to him, Daniel, what? I said, you're not going to do that. He said, Dad, that's not your decision. That's my decision. He said, as a parent, I think it was 11 or 12, your decision is to tell me what you think the consequence will be. I was fuming. I said, it doesn't work that way. He said, Dad, that's how it works. I said, I thought about it, and I came back and I told him what the punishment would be. He said, Dad, that's not a fair punishment. You've taken my free choice away. The crime doesn't match the punishment. It's not that bad what I want to do. You've taken my free. He says, maybe go back and think about it again and come back with a fair punishment. I don't even remember how it ended. I just remember that's what this kid was like, and every time it came to decision, he said, Dad, I understand it's your job as a parent to decide what the punishment is, but you're not going to take my free choice away. He said, you're lucky that I've come to tell you what it is I want to do. It's because I'm honest, just be thankful. So boy, oh boy, was this kid a challenge. But I must tell you, he with the army, it just is unbelievable what it did for him. And he was considering continuing in the army. And we hope and pray that he will.
He will. You had mentioned to me that maybe it's some of that, deep energy and risk taking that allowed him to save tens of people. At least that information. I wanted to ask you two questions, but I'll ask the first one is help us daven for him. Please tell everyone who's listening his Hebrew name. We have a picture of him now, and that makes prayer all the deeper. Tell us also what we can do from here. And it's not only for Daniel. I think a lot of American Jews around the world who'll be viewers here. We want to know what you need, what we can do for the situation. People here have been very generous and trying to help in their own way. Tell us.
I think a few things. I think firstly, Daniel's Hebrew name is Daniel Shimon. Shimon's his grandfather, my grandfather, that many in our family are named after. Daniel Shimon ben Sharon. My wife's name is Shelley. Everyone's calling her Sharon, but Hebrew name is Sharon. So it's Daniel Shimon ben Sharon. And you could daven or continue to daven for Daniel Shimon ben Sharon amongst all the other missing and captives. What can be done? I'd say a few things from my personal point of view. Number one, I'm going to talk firstly as a rabbi. I really believe and this is the book that we might speak a minute about that I wrote in English, just came out in Yom Ha'atzmaut, that the most important thing on a spiritual level for the Jewish people is unity. And we have lacked this unity. The last 5 years have been so difficult in Israel with the multiple elections. The last year in Israel, who would have believed that we would have had such a year? Who would have believed we would have seen the things we saw in Yom Kippur? And as painful as it has been and is, for some reason, with all the pain, the result of it has been that the Jewish people are standing together. And for me, I believe the most important thing today in Israel and around the world is to stand together as one people. And this anti-Semitism, I believe, is all coming just to, we don't know why things happen, but the result of it, as Rav Soloveitchik always said, not lama, but lama. We don't know why we can't read Hashem's mind, but at least the result must be we have to stand together as one. And I believe anyone in a community leadership position, wherever we find ourselves, bring communities together, do inter-community things, come and visit Israel. Let's use this platform to be one people. And I think the Chazara b'tshuva, what are the three things which change the Gzeira? Tshuva, Tfilah, Tzedakah. Tshuva, I believe, in of Avat Yisrael, of standing together as one in a way that we haven't, and renewing this covenant of faith that we have, number one. Number two, Tfilah. What is more powerful? It says in Dvarim, Umi goy gadol asher Elokim krovim elav. Who is like the Jewish people that has God so close to them? B'chol koreinu elav. And we have to stand together and daven. Every one of us where we are, we can daven Tfilah. And finally, Tzedakah. Tzedakah, as Rava Sachs from the Ernstein Sex Center, as Rava Sachs often would say, is that Tzedakah is not charity. It's some type of social justice. It's making society better. It's much more than charity. And each one of us can and should do something. I think every one of us on our campuses and our communities, we need to stand up for Israel. We need to stand together as the Jewish people. And I think we also, if people have got access to congressmen and to senators, wherever people can do activism from their point of influence, anywhere and everywhere, is to stand with Israel, to stand together with the hostages, not to let them go off the agenda, and to do everything we can to reinforce this one people through tshuva of closeness to each other, through prayer, tefillah, and through making society better, through feeling the pain of each other, no matter how far we are, and doing everything we can from an activist point of view to keep the unity of the Jewish people together, and to ensure that that we're all doing our bit from an activism point of view to stand up for Israel and to do whatever we can with any position of influence for those, for the plight of the hostages.
It's amazing how you've given us hope. I hope we, in some way, just being able to tell your story and know that the love of those you know, but also the love of strangers is behind you, that we are all thinking about Daniel Shimon ben Sharon and Doron. Rabbi Sachs said, hope rebuilds the ruins of Jerusalem. The Jewish people kept hope alive, and hope kept the Jewish people alive, keeps us alive now. And we will be paying attention to this story, to the details of this story, and thinking about you and holding you and Shelley, Adina and Shira and Yonatan, Daniel in our hearts and in our prayers. And we hope to hear the best of news as soon as possible. Thank you so much for joining us. I know that you have many other interviews and important things to do to tell this story, and we will go and be witness and bear witness to your story and share it. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you. If I may just say a final word, if I can say that the thing I fervently believe in most at this point is the togetherness of the Jewish people. And Rav Kook would often highlight that if we can stand together as one, despite all the differences, and just hold together the sense of camaraderie, the sense of consensus, the sense of, we've been forced by circumstances to, unfortunately from the outside, to see that we have each other and we are one people. And if we can just keep reclaiming that and reflecting on that together and reinforcing that, I really believe with every fiber of my being that that is a true spiritual iron dome of the Jewish people. We've craved it. Hashem's brought it to us with such pain. If we can perpetuate it, if we can reinforce it, if we can not give into the yetzer of divisiveness and just hold the line together, please God, in the merit of that, Hashem will protect every single one of our soldiers and bring all of the hostages back. Bezrat Hashem.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much. And thank all of you for joining us here. Shavua Tov. It should be a good week and certainly a better week. Thank you.